Okay. So we talked about a bunch of different hormones last time. And let's go back over them because it's a little confusing, right? And I also want to address a couple of misconceptions. So the menstrual cycle, the entire thing is 28 days long, right? And the first 5 to 7 days of those are what you consider your period or menstruation, right? Now, there's always like kind of a public or a layman stereotype about women being cranky before their period, which is totally true, right? People get cranky around their period, but it's not because you're hormonal. If you look at the graph, right, your hormones are actually lowest during menstruation. It's the low levels of hormones that tend to make you cranky, right? So when someone's like, oh, she's just being hormonal, and it's like, no, it's the lack of hormones that makes you cranky, right? So just correcting that misconception right there. So let's review real quick. We have luteinizing hormone, right, which results from the formation of the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum is going to secrete progesterone, this line here. So now we have, let's start from the beginning. So we have this little tiny follicle with an egg inside. Follicle stimulating hormone causes this follicle to grow. You get a surge of follicle stimulating hormone, the red one, and a surge of luteinizing hormone. And those together cause ovulation. It causes that egg to rupture out of that follicle. And the follicle becomes the corpus luteum. Now, this corpus luteum is the thing that secretes progesterone. And progesterone is the thing that maintains that uterine lining so it's nice and thick, getting ready for that embryo to implant. And I wanted to talk about that first because we started talking about different forms of birth control, and I want to show you the difference between a normal cycle and a cycle with hormonal birth control, because what you're changing is the amount of hormones to control either ovulation or implantation. Those are the two things that birth control prevents. It either prevents the egg from being released, so there's no egg to be fertilized, or it prevents implantation by keeping this uterine lining thin. So let's talk about that. Okay, so here's that same cycle that we just looked at. We have FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone that causes the follicle to grow. We have luteinizing hormone, right? It's a surge of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone that cause ovulation, cause that egg to be released. And then we have an increase in progesterone, and that is what helps maintain that uterine lining. Okay, so some forms of birth control, mostly the pill, they increase and keep steady the level of progesterone, and they increase and keep steady the level of estrogen. Now, these guys negatively influence the production of LH and FSH. They suppress the production of LH and FSH. So if they repress or reduce the amount of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone that are released, you don't ovulate. And that is how conception is prevented. This is also why if you're taking a pill, if you miss one day, remember, from here to here is 28 days, right? If you miss one day, you are providing a big enough window for that surge to start, because one day, let's see, where's my pen? If you skip a day, that's enough to bring that estrogen level down, and that progesterone level down, which is enough to cause that luteinizing hormone to spike and cause ovulation. So you literally can, if you, oh, can I let somebody in the Zoom? Somebody's waiting. Yes, I can. Sorry. So skipping one pill can screw things up. Okay, questions about that? No? Okay. Oh, I thought I heard one almost. Okay. All right, so let's get back to our applications and understandings. We're going to do the last one. This is A4, the use of IVF to suspend the normal secretion of hormones, followed by the use of artificial doses of hormones to induce superovulation and establish a pregnancy. So, when you hear about people using IVF, in vitro fertilization, it's basically a method to fertilize eggs outside of the body, and then you reimplant them either in the original donor of the egg or in somebody else, which would be a surrogate. Ooh, I have a question. Okay, so somebody's asking about like if you're taking the pills and like you so you can, if you're taking the hormonal pill, let me go back. Okay. So you have days 1 through 28, right, on your birth control pills. Each pill has the proper amount of hormones to maintain this level. And then at the end of the cycle, you get like that 1 week of sugar pills. And those sugar pills allow those hormone levels to drop, right? And then you shed your uterine lining, and then the process starts over again. So sometimes if like you're getting ready to go on a beach vacation or whatever, and you're like, wow, I'm supposed to have my period this week. I don't want to have my period this week. I'm just going to stop taking my birth control pills, have my period now, and then go back on them afterwards so that you can like time your period. You can do that, but it's risky. Oh, I cut out after I said sometimes. Okay, so I'll back up and start again. Sometimes if you're on birth control pills, people will use them to help time their period. So like say they have something they want to do. They want to go on vacation, they want to go to the beach. They don't want to get their period on a certain week. So they will change when they take their pill, or they'll just not take the pill for a couple of days so they can get their period like a week early. That's risky because you're interfering with, there's no guarantee that you won't ovulate during the time that you stop taking the pills. So anytime after you stop taking them, right? So say you like want your period a week earlier than normal. So you stop taking your pills a week early, you have your period, and then you start taking your pills again. You may ovulate during that window. So you're not protected when you start taking those pills again. You could have ovulated in that time. So it's generally not advisable. What you can do is you can skip the sugar pill week and just start the next pack of pills. That sugar pill week, you don't have to do that every time. So there are certain doses of pills that will allow you to skip those for like 3 months, right? So it's just continuous hormonal pills and no sugar pills, so you don't get your period for 3 months. You can do that. I would suggest that you would do that. You should do that instead of trying to stop taking the pills, get your period early, and then start taking them again, because you could ovulate in that time. So just to be safe, just skip the sugar pills and just keep going. All right. Does that answer the question that I got in the chat? Okay. So there's another question. Why does the pill increase depression and anxiety? It can in some people, and other people it doesn't. And that has to do with your personal reaction to different types of drugs. So anytime you're messing with hormones, because remember, hormones are a chemical messaging system throughout the body, there's a chance that these chemical messaging systems are impacting other neurotransmitters. So not only do hormones control physical processes that are happening in the body, they also control your moods, right? So like I said, it's the drop in those hormones that tends to make you cranky around your period. So can I give you the specific biochemical link between birth control pills and depression and anxiety? No. But it's common to see changes in mood or behavior with medications that modify hormonal or neurotransmitter processes in the body. It also works the other way. Birth control actually helps mitigate those symptoms in people as well. It just depends. It depends on your own biochemistry. Okay, back to in vitro. So basically, in vitro is when you take a bunch of eggs out of the body, you fertilize them in a dish, and you stick them back in the hopes of having a baby. Now, it's not that simple though. Because women tend to only ovulate one egg at a time, we use our knowledge of hormones, FSH and LH specifically, to kind of super harvest. So ripen a whole bunch of eggs at one time, so you ovulate a whole bunch, so that you have better chances of fertilizing an egg. It's a very expensive process, and it can kind of wreak havoc with your natural rhythms, and it's not so much fun. I had a friend that did this for a couple of years. Not so great. Okay, so let's talk about how it works. By artificially providing high doses, timed doses of follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, you are causing the development of more than one egg. So that results in more mature follicles than normal. And we call that superovulation. Give me a thumbs up when you're ready. Okay. Alrighty. So when those follicles are mature, the eggs inside are removed and they're placed in dishes, right? And then we take sperm cells and we mix them in the dish. And if fertilization occurs, then those zygotes are implanted back into the uterus where they can implant in the wall of the endothelium and grow. Now, this is where you get issues like multiples, right? So, like John and Kate make eight, that wasn't like a natural process. That was a result of IVF. The human body can't comfortably carry more than 1 to 2 offspring at a time, right? So anytime you see people that are having like quadruplets, right? Triplets, quadruplets. Occasionally triplets are natural, but like quadruplets and above, that's typically the result of an IVF process where they've implanted a bunch of embryos in the hope that some will implant, right? Because you don't want to implant just one, because if it doesn't work, then you've just wasted all that time and all that effort and all that money. So they implant usually 3, 4, 5, 6 embryos. And then if they all implant, then you have to go through a process where you either have to selectively remove some of them, right? It's called selective reduction, or take your chances and try and carry them all to term. How did Kate survive that pregnancy? Um, yeah, I don't know. With a lot of medical support, I'm sure. And you got to think it's not great for the babies either, because the mom's only capable of producing and providing so much support for growing entities. So all of those resources that would be used to develop one baby were then split across all the babies that she was carrying at one time. So you can, it's not ideal. So in summary, egg production is stimulated by injecting levels of hormones at the appropriate time to cause overproduction of follicles and eggs. Those eggs are retrieved. A sperm sample is provided, right? You have um, fertilization, and then those fertilized eggs are reimplanted. The question is this similar to what they do when people donate eggs? Yes. So when you donate eggs, you go through basically the first two steps of this. So if you wanted to donate eggs or you are selling your eggs, which people do, you go through the process of having over harvesting or overstimulation, right, to produce a whole bunch of eggs, and then they retrieve them. Yep. And then they're frozen, usually before they're used. And this is actually, if you have somebody that has mitochondrial disease in their family, because remember, mitochondria are only inherited through the mom's side of the family. So if you are trying to avoid a mitochondrial disease, this is an option. You can get an egg donor from someone, or if you don't produce eggs, you can have eggs donated from somebody else. There's even, not in the United States, but in England, there is a new procedure by which they actually take genetic information from three different people and put it together. So you have an egg that has the mitochondria removed because it's got a mitochondrial defect. You have an egg from a second woman, and that mitochondria is used to replace the mitochondria in the first egg, and then you have a sperm from a third person. So when that fertilized embryo grows into a person, you actually have a person with genetic information from three different people. It's pretty cool. How does that work if eggs are so tiny? Microscopes. So we can actually do cell surgery. I'll see if I can find. Actually, I might have pictures of it in here. If I go back to a couple slides, you can see that it's a micrograph image of somebody actually implanting. I don't know if it's implanting the sperm or if it's implanting the mitochondria. We'll go back and look. There was also just a story in the news about how a embryo was frozen 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, and it was just implanted and the baby was just born. So, and it was born to a woman. It was more than that. It was like 27 years or something like that. And the embryo was born to a woman that was younger than the embryo. Like the embryo had been frozen longer than the person that birthed it was alive. So, can you imagine being born older than your mom? Okay, I'm going to scroll back so you can see that picture. There it is. So this is an egg, and I'm not sure if this is, it looks like a mitochondrial transfer. You have a glass rod, and you just kind of like hold the egg at the end of the glass rod, and then you have a tiny, tiny, tiny needle, and you're usually doing this under a stereo microscope or a light microscope. Okay. Oh, yeah, just a little more information. Since the menstrual cycle was halted, progesterone supplements are given to maintain the uterus lining. So, because when that egg is implanted back into the mother, right, that's interrupting the natural cycle. You have to provide the mother extra progesterone to maintain that uterine lining because she didn't go through the natural process of fertilization. So you need outside progesterone to tell her body, okay, this is where you are in the cycle now. You need to maintain that uterine lining because there's an embryo implanting. So that's the end of the lecture. Um, but there's a lot to like unpack and discuss here. So I prefer that, well, we can do a couple of things. So one, you should be able to, um, I think one of the objectives is to discuss the ethical implications of IVF, right? So it's expensive, but I'm going to step off a little bit and I want you as a class to kind of come up with the pros and cons of IVF. And I want you to have a discussion about, who has access to it, who doesn't, how does this change um, the ability and human reproductive rights in different places? What are the personal aspects? What are the economic aspects? So, and I'm going to let Zane kind of run the discussion, but what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to just kind of quickly pick a side. IVF, and the prompt will be IVF should be provided by your insurance because most IVF treatments are not. So you're paying for this out of pocket. So, should IVF treatments be paid for by your insurance? And you guys can have that discussion for the rest of the period. I'm going to come up with a couple of weird stories and I will post them in the chat. So if you're curious about IVF in today, where we're at, and kind of the weird things that happen, you can check those out. And so, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and you guys have your discussion. People online, I can set up a breakout room so that you can have your own discussion. Okay. And I'm going to stop the recording. I should definitely do that.